Well, welcome. I'm going to be talking today about our Workplace Promise campaign, which is part of our Workplace Promise Institute. I'm Jackie Garrick. I'm the founder of Whistleblowers of America. I'm a social worker by background, a former Army officer, and I got involved in my own whistleblowing case while I was a senior manager at the Pentagon, the director of the Defense Suicide Prevention Office. So I was doing a lot of work with combat vets, combat trauma, and I recognized the need for peer support, mentorship, to help people when they were going through a difficult process. I started to think about this more and created the Workplace Promise Institute as I dealt with more and more whistleblowers who were going through these hostile work environments. So for a minute, let me take a second and just sort of define what we mean by a whistleblower. So that is somebody who makes a disclosure of wrongdoing, usually in a government or corporate office space, and then 9 times out of 10, they suffer retaliation, discrimination, or harassment. So we provide them with peer support and counseling to help them get through. When we decided that we needed to also take the lessons learned from the wrongdoing and inform the right doing, we created the Workplace Promise Institute. So the mission here for us is really to look at and talk about resilience in the community, but for the workplace that it touches. And my motto is everyone deserves a safe place to work. So we begin to think that there's this segue between an individual's mental health and how productive they are as an employee. And I found this quote a couple of years ago when I was working on a project from the World Bank president at the time, and he highlights this idea that productivity and global development are connected. We know, according to the United Nations report, that 5% of the world global GDP is lost to corruption. 5% is lost. That's trillions of dollars every year out of the world economy goes to fund corrupt activities. And when I talk about corruption, I'm talking about major corruption, things like money laundering for terrorism, human trafficking, insider trading. It can be as big as that, or some of the smaller contracting fraud, things we see that organizations don't even want to be bothered with to investigate, but we know that those impacts and those harms are more broad-based. So how did we decide on the Workplace Promise as an institute, as a campaign? So when I was the director of the Defense Suicide Prevention Office, I got to do a couple of really interesting things. I worked with the World Health Organization on their suicide prevention imperative, and then we went to Geneva in 2016 and we worked on building this toolkit that was designed to prevent suicide. It was about looking at all these different aspects and elements, and we were peer reviewing it, right? We had psychiatrists, social workers, nurses, all working together to look at what were some of these best practices for suicide prevention, and then how could we build them into a toolkit. So we were doing that, and I kind of came up with the idea that as we were working with these foreign service officers, and we were running a project actually at the time, it was like a joint effort with Finland, the UK, and a group in Cairo, Egypt. And one of the reasons that this peer support was appealing beyond our military and to other populations harkens to something I've heard Vikram Patel talk about, that in some areas it's very hard to reach a population that needs your help the most, right? They're resistant, reluctant to ask for help. We know that in communities of color, in rural areas where there might not even be good mental health, having a trained advocate, somebody who can help you figure out what you're going through and what you need is important. So we we think about that as marrying up the help-seeking behaviors that we talk about a lot and the help-offering behaviors that we don't talk about a lot from a professional standpoint. So we introduced the idea of this workplace promise because we took all of these documents that the World Health Organization had created, that the United Nations had created. The United Nations has a Declaration on Human Rights. So there are these basic concepts that we want people to embrace. We're looking for things to be social justice, values-based, diversity, inclusion, right? These are all things we talk about and train to, but we don't always operationalize. So what we were looking for was a way to operationalize the training. So instead of me just coming up here and talking for 45 minutes, an hour, and then I leave and everybody goes back to their job, we wanted an actual toolkit, something that made people take notice. So I've passed out the proclamation that you have in front of you. This becomes the meat and potatoes of the promise. And we use the green and the green pen, that I have one right here that says Workplace Promise Institute on it, because green is the color of mental health. And we often say that the pen is mightier than the sword, and that's coming from a former Army officer, that the marketing and the way we communicate and the way we operationalize these activities for good mental health, what we call salutogenic approaches, is what builds resilience. So we wanted to have that frame of reference, something people could see, hold, touch, and then bring the campaign to life. So when we monitor the campaign and we monitor these actions, right, what gets measured gets done. Pentagon motto. So we thought that we needed to create a way, again, to take what we knew about wrongdoing, have it inform right doing, and make it operational. So why you? Why your organization? I think we've been hearing from other speakers and other talks about how important employee engagement is and how important it is that they know what to do and how to respond. It makes them more productive, it manages change, it impacts morale, it impacts satisfaction, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, community satisfaction, and it facilitates problem solving. So you need this open and honest approach when you're working with small groups, large groups. And each employee becomes then their own personal champion of your workplace culture. And culture is something we give a lot of lip service to, but being able to actually operationalize your culture and change your culture when you need to is not always that easy. So that's why, as we think about this, we think about it in terms of the tools that people can use and the activities that you can build that go every day into this. So workers spend an average of 40 hours a day at work. They are very indoctrinated and invested in the culture. But one of the things that we overlook is the rate of suicide among working age adults. Suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among working age adults. So we know about heart disease, we know about cancer, we know that there is accidents, but when we look at the actual data, and suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among working aged adults, that's not a group that we talk about or think about often. We know suicide is high among the military population, but the military is a small percentage of Americans. So we have to look at the broader culture before we can even understand military and combat trauma and suicide. When we think about the suicide rates in this country and we see how they're exploding, we have to look at all aspects of how that person is being impacted. We think right away about those interpersonal relationships. Are they divorced? Are they a single mother? Are they depressed? Were they mentally ill? We don't think about them experiencing a hostile work environment. And that's something where if we got behind that and we could start championing these cultures for change, that we can really do something about the suicide rate in this country as well. So we believe that as we think about all of these people and bringing them together, that we have to think outside the box. Now, I've been warned that when you think outside the box, sometimes you have to watch out for the lid. But in this case, when we think outside the box, we have to really be uplifting the lid and making sure that the change that we're going for matters. So that's where we came up with an idea for a signing ceremony. That's why you need a pen. You're going to have a signing ceremony. It's an opportunity to showcase leadership commitment to the resiliency of the workforce and build these better communities of care, build a pathway for success, for good health, for salutogenic approaches. So we advocate that you host these signing ceremonies, and you could build it around. It's like right now, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's you could build around that the September Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, but it could be the anniversary of your company or the another special event. You could be having a conference. You can build in these signing ceremonies where you get to everybody together and you've got your proclamation. I know some people might not have this in front of them, but we built this actual document that becomes your signing ceremony and for the things that you're actually going to have people sign. So this provides an opportunity to share a message, to share a commitment, to highlight what you really think as an organization, and then be able to put it out there. It's on paper. You can get copies suitable for framing, hang it up on your wall. Everybody who comes into your business can see that this is a workplace with a promise. So I'm not going to read all the 10 elements to you that's on paper. You can sort of go through this and read each one of these things yourself. I also encourage organizations that if this doesn't quite fit your model, it's too wordy, you don't like it, then change it. Make it yours, own it. But when we thought about and we started to digest, like I said, all the tools from the World Health Organization and the UN, those were our two primary documents, as well as some other things, but primarily looking at this from a global perspective and a global imperative to reduce suicides and build resilience. We felt, one, it's a values-based approach. It's a commitment to social justice. It's a commitment to fairness. It's a commitment to equity. It has to include outreach and awareness, right? It's got to have scope. It's got to have mission and purpose that people relate to. I believe in the peer support model very much, and I think that every organization should have some sort of an employee assistance program approach. You embed that into your organization. It becomes part of how you succession plan your organization. So if you're bringing in junior people, how are you engaging them and mentoring them so that they grow with your company as opposed to leave your organization? Or if you're a government agency, how are you planning for people to come in and have a future with you? I know millennials, we keep talking about millennials want to come in and they want to make that 6-figure salary and be the CEO. Give me 2 weeks, I'll take over, everything will be great. But that's not the reality of how most government agencies especially, or corporations build their business. It takes a little bit of planning, and you have to be engaged in your community, right? Especially if you're doing business in it. You have to know your community. You have to be able to give them a sense of who you are and that you have this commitment and that you have this mindfulness about the world we live in, and that you, in your own way, with your own business, whatever your perspective is, whether you're a real estate agency or a mental health, that there are things you can do that show your community that you're a good neighbor. You want to build capacity. You want to bring not just your business, but other businesses to your community. You want to think about the most vulnerable populations in your area. How disenfranchised are they? and how can you help them? And that may be having a policy for single parents or having a drug recovery policy. I know most companies and most organizations will say, oh, we're drug-free, zero tolerance. Well, that's great. But what does that mean to the employee who might have an addiction issue? Do you have, and the SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, has a whole program dedicated to workplace drug reduction. So how are you dealing with that in your workplace? Access to quality care. Now I know not everybody can afford the benefits, and we're not even going to discuss insurance and what that conversation would do to people, especially in Florida. But we have to think about access to quality care. And that goes beyond just having insurance, right? That has to do with what kind of other programs might you have for your employees, even if it's just having a resource list and directory of all those good neighbors that are providing those social services. You know, I worked with somebody who, because she was over 60, didn't know that she can go to the Council on Aging and get assistance. Even though we started out talking about her employment issue, she didn't know she had other benefits. I always ask, are you a veteran? Because I'm a veteran, I'm hypersensitive to the benefits that are offered by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Are you taking advantage of all the programs that are available to you, and making sure that that level of care is being accessed? Education and training, things we're doing right now, right? You make that commitment, and I think you heard the previous speaker, Steve, talk about training. Well, training is only as good as until it gets to the doorway over there. Then the door closes and the training goes away. So the training is important, but it needs to be operationalized. So it's a constant commitment. It's a constant recommitment to making sure that people have bought into the training and they know how to use the training that you're giving them. Research, surveillance. And when I say surveillance, I don't mean spy on people. I'm talking about data surveillance. Like, know a little bit about your workforce, who they are, what their needs are, what's going on around you, what might be impacting people. Has there been a mass shooting in an organization similar to yours? Has there been corruption and fraud? Like, what might be making your employees sensitive to? And know what are some of the best practices around dealing with those issues. Know how to deal with domestic violence when it comes into your workplace. Don't put on blinders and go, oh, I can't see it, I don't know. Be real, be ready. And I think that helps us feel empowered. And that's where I believe that you have to think about resilience in your management, and that has to be, again, a commitment from the highest level. And then, of course, be an advocate for the resources. You know, speak out, promote. It doesn't harm your business if you promote something or somebody else as being a good tool. I mean, I always say, high tide raises all ships, right? If you're uplifting and raising everybody, to quote a dear friend, sure, when they go low, we go high, right? So we want to be in that place. So I always say that we can start by identifying what makes our individuals and stakeholders good partners. And you can take out a blank piece of paper or a whiteboard. I'm a big fan of the whiteboard. And you just start brainstorming things. Like, who are my stakeholders? Who should I be talking to? Where are the individuals? Where are my champions? Sometimes that's internal to your organization. Sometimes that's a customer. Sometimes that's other beneficiaries. You have to find those people and get them involved in what you're doing. And then, of course, you have to be introducing this, hey, we're going to be part of this Workplace Promise campaign. We're going to make this commitment, but we're going to need help operationalizing our commitment. Because here's the trick. You can do education training, you can sign a piece of paper, you can hang it on the wall, but if you put it down and you forget forget about it, then you haven't really accomplished anything. So here's the trick. Here's where this becomes a toolkit. So once you've done your signing ceremony and you've stuck it up on the wall and everybody's clapped, now you have to think about, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to take some of those goals, those things that I just enumerated, and go, well, let me look at this. So maybe I can't do all of these things every day, all year. But out of these 11 things that I'm looking at, why don't we start figuring out how to prioritize them? Maybe I pick 2, maybe I pick 4, maybe I pick 5, and I say, you know what? In the first 6 months, the first year, we're going to do these things. And we're going to have a task force, a committee. We're going to showcase this. I once walked into a bank, a local small bank, and they had all this local art hanging up. And they were profiling local heroes in their community. And so they had this artwork. It had nothing to do with banking, but they were showing who came to their bank, who they thought of as their heroes. Very powerful, simple, not expensive. Little sticky notes, thank you cards that you hand out, right? Good job. Put it on a sticky note if you can't afford to go to Hallmark, right? There are ways to thank people and motivate them because you've made a commitment to a promise. And you've got them on, you can make a recording. There's this guy, Chris, here, who I think would help you out greatly if you wanted to record a video. Or if you can't afford Chris, take out your cell phone and record your own message. Post it on your organization's website. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them who your champions are. Track your social media. That's not just, sign up and get a free pen, right? Be somebody. Be somebody. Be relatable. Have a story. Show your empathy. Show who you really are, and people will follow you, and then they'll want to do business with you. So, just a quick timeline, right? Because I was an Army officer, we like these slides with timelines on it. We need to develop a strategy. So yeah, we're going to have a signing ceremony, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month, or it's Suicide Prevention Month, or it's Depression Awareness Month, or hey, it's my birthday, it's my anniversary, I'm going to have this idea for a signing ceremony. We're going to get everybody together, we're going to serve paella, and we're going to help everybody understand that this is now our commitment. We're going to have this proclamation. That's our strategy. Then we're going to share it. We're going to make sure everybody understands what we're doing. We're going to do training and education around it. And we're going to then initiate the project, and we're going to track our results. So I've sometimes taught college classes and policy and practices. And when we talk about policy, when we talk about the strategic plan, we often forget that, again, it's got to be operational. It's got to have that follow through. So I always think about Deming, right? Plan, do, check, act. So it's easy to plan. That's always the fun part. Sometimes the doing is the fun part. But checking on our progress and acting on that feedback are sometimes the two pieces that we leave out. So we need to have that follow through. We need to bring that circle and think about our continuous process improvement, because that's part of your plan, right? Is that you're going to have a way for people to communicate with you. They might not like what you did. It might have been offending somebody, or for some reason. Maybe that wasn't your intention. Maybe there was something you missed. But you're going to take that feedback and you're going to listen. And what you listen to is going to determine how you go back to your strategy one and change your plan, because we can always change our plan. We can always apologize to the people we hurt. We should do those things. So, and then when I think about beyond this, it's that long-term commitment to those things and those values that you want your company to have. And you want to reduce what might be an adversarial or a conflict of interest, or that perception that there's discrimination and harassment. you want to be able to replicate what you're doing throughout your organization. I mean, I've worked with very big government agencies, right? We have 2.4 million active duty guard and reserve when I was doing things with the military. So that was trying to communicate to a lot of people. But if you're a small business and you got 12 people and you can sit down your top 2 leaders and say, hey, we're going to get everybody together and this is what we're going to do. Let's get everybody on board and have their buy-in. Let's work this out. Let's create the products and the opportunities to share and network and track our results. And I think that's the key part, is that feedback loop. So you can always contact me. I'm happy to help. You can move ahead, launch your own Workplace Promise campaign. We will encourage people. You can provide the certificates. You can have every employee sign something like this. You can include it into your onboarding process, right? So you have new employees, you have employee orientation. Make this part of that, right? Tell them this is our corporate culture. We want you to sign this like they sign for their benefits and their paychecks. This becomes part of what they agree to. It becomes part of your employee handbook. You embed it into your best practices so that it becomes an awareness that you're sharing with everybody, so that no matter who comes to work for you, they feel like they're part of something greater than themselves. This is me. We're having our own conference, of course, because we have to now do the little 5 minutes of a commercial. Do I look like Anna holding this up? So our Workplace Promise Institute is September 7 through 9. I have more of these flyers. We have a table downstairs. We have what we call the Giraffe Awards. So nominate your giraffes. Giraffes are employees who stand tall and stick their necks out. They risk the criticism and the adversarial nature of maybe of what they're saying, but they're doing it for the greater good. And I mean, when I think of most of our whistleblowers, that's what they want. They want to be giraffes. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to feel like what they can contribute matters. I guess I can answer questions, any comments, thoughts?